Hyundai Tucson engine replacement. Let's get into it. It's a 2017 model. This engine has some serious oil consumption problems. The owner did like 3 oil changes for the life of the motor. But like any engine replacement, I'm going to start by obviously draining all the fluids, getting the undercovers off, and then I'm going to take the intake off, battery out. I'm going to remove this pipe. I believe I need to discharge the air conditioning, so I'm going to hook my machine up, pull the refrigerant, and then we'll go from there. Taking a look underneath the vehicle, I got the wheels off on the ground, and I got the fluids draining here. This cover here is held on by a bunch of 10mm bolts that just go around the whole perimeter under here, just like that. Bunch of 10s, easy to do. Got the oil draining, oil pan obviously. Transmission drain is right here, directly on the bottom. Fill is up there. Let me zoom in. Fill's right there when we go to fill it. And the radiator is drained through the foot down here, and your little petcock is right there. But looking underneath, we just have this torque mount, and then the exhaust is connected right there. Pretty straightforward, really easy. The only other thing I see down here that needs to be disassembled is this axle assembly. Okay, let's move forward. I attempted to release that lower ball joint with these 3 nuts on the bottom, but that didn't work, so I ended up taking off this through bolt, and then I was able to pry it down and release that and push the knuckle forward to get the axle out of that knuckle there. Then I couldn't push the knuckle forward far enough, so I had to actually take this sway bar end link off of the top of the shock there, and then I was able to get enough room. And I just pried the inner joint out. Here you can see that cotter pin for the through bolt. The right side axle was pretty much the same, except for 3 bolts that were on the block that was holding on the intermediate shaft here. It's the only difference. I removed the nuts for the exhaust here, but then I noticed I actually couldn't reach the O2 sensor wiring, so I just left it in place and moved on until I got up top. But here I removed this cover thinking that there was going to be bolts holding on a flex plate, but to my surprise, there's no flex plate on this. It has a dual clutch transmission, so this is actually a flywheel. So what I ended up doing was just undoing all these bolts that would be hard to access while the engine's on the table. And I think it was time to go up top after that. Now up top, I hooked up the AC machine and started discharging the refrigerant before I started working on all the stuff up here. Circular. So what I'm doing is I'm just using my pliers to grab it and spin it. Not ideal, but it's working. Well, I just read the instructions, and these are actually just little caps that they sit on there, and then you remove the cap, and then it's a regular flathead, or you can use a hex tool. But I used the flathead and just pried it off. That's how I'm going to reinstall it. That's why you read the instructions, guys. Alright, so the way that works is once you flip this up, then you can push this in. This is like a quick disconnect. So you push it this direction, like that. Like that. And that opens up these things on the inside that you can then, and then you can push the whole hose that way and it comes off. Easy peasy. Here's a close-up of this. This thing slides out of there. There's a little notch on the top here, so you have to pry this outwards. But once you get that out, then you just push this, and it releases the mechanism on the inside. I don't know if I like all this quick disconnect stuff. Alright, quick check-in. Take this ground off here. Got the whole harness off. I actually had to go underneath the car and undo the compressor connector. It's all the way down there. But they made this pretty easy because all the hard to get to connectors go right here. So you don't have to mess with all of them that run underneath the manifold. But I took that harness and just pulled it up over here out of the way. Fuel lines out of the way, these hoses are out of the way. I got these heater core hoses back there off, and they're just pulled here out of the way. I got these wires out of the fuse box, and there's a couple connectors down there. Need to be unplugged. I just got that bungeed to the motor. So that's pretty much it. On the bottom here, we got to disconnect this ground from the bottom of the transmission. I disconnect this connector here is for, this connector right here is for the O2 sensor. I actually need to pull that through. Alright, so we'll just leave that loose there and we'll take that pipe out in one piece. Actually, before we go up, I just realized I forgot to disconnect the shift cable. That's just a 12 here, and then this quick clip here. I'm just gonna lift it up and out, and then I'll just pull this out of the way with the harness. Okay, quick check-in from the bottom. I got these AC lines off. I just tucked them in over there, out of the way. Put some plugs in here. I couldn't fit plugs in here properly. Some kind of weird sizes. So I stuck a rag in there, just kind of forced to plug in. I ended up just removing this lower hose completely. Just so I don't have any clearance issues right here. I don't have to deal with any of that when it's coming out. The exhaust is out. But all that's left now is I'm going to remove this motor mount, and then we're going to lower this onto the table. On the side here in the wheel well, I peeled back the fender liner. There's a access panel here that gives you access to these two bolts. It attaches up there to the side of that motor mount that's on the transmission. And then there's one up there that I'm going to do from the top. So let's get this motor out. Alright, well, that was kind of hard to get this off because it got wedged. But I used my little pry tool to pry it against the bottom here. Got that out. Now this thing's loose, as you can see. So I'm just gonna pull the table forward slightly. Well, first, set this back over here. I'm gonna pull the table forward slightly, as far as I can, and slowly start going up with the lift. So while maneuvering the table forward and going up with the car, I started to realize that I actually wasn't going to clear the subframe, and the side post motor mount was hitting the right side frame rail, as we'll see here in a minute. So I actually had to stop what I was doing while it's on the table and go into the engine bay and start removing some parts, as you'll see here right now. Okay, quick update. Mistakes were made. On the way up, I hit a snag here where this mount, which is bolted to the side of the engine there, was getting wedged against the frame rail, and over there the transmission was getting wedged against the subframe. So I managed to get this off. I had to take this off, which sits right next to it on the side of the block. And I also removed the downpipe, which I have just learned that it looked like it had been off before. The bottom bolt was broken. Had an exhaust leak coming through here. So that's interesting. But the downpipe looked like it wasn't going to clear the subframe down there. So I just removed it now so I don't have to fight with it later. But I think we're going to have enough room here to get this out. So let's try again. So this time on the way up, I hit another snag where I realized that the front of the engine, all the harness stuff, was hitting the radiator fan. So I ended up having to lower it slightly again, and then I removed the radiator fan, and then I had enough room to pull the motor forward so it would clear the subframe in the back, and finally lifted the car off the engine. Alright, well there it is, guys. That last bit was a struggle. So what I should have done was remove this side mount right here that I showed you. I should have removed that ahead of time, which is just held on by 3 12 mils, and as you can see, someone broke this before. This one snapped right now. Luckily we're changing the turbo. And the other thing I removed was the radiator fan in the upper hose. The upper hose is right here. By getting that off, I was able to get more clearance in the front here to push the motor further forward, because I was having issues with this part right here hitting the subframe right there. It wouldn't clear right there. So once I got those parts off, I was able to push it far enough forward. I had my coworker help me with the lift while I was managing the engine table, and then we were able to lift the car all the way off. So I hope that was helpful if you have to do one of these. I guess these motors have some issues with oil consumption. This one ran really low, destroyed the turbo, and it has a rod knock now. And it looks like they didn't really do their oil changes all that much. So I'm sure that was a contributing factor. So I'm going to be putting all that together here in the next coming days. But that's where I'm going to leave this video. Thanks for watching. Peace.